Upon returning, Director David Brennan of the United States Federal Hunter Bureau immediately summoned Adam White and Norma Selner. He wanted to know what had gone wrong and why they had failed to recruit Jinwoo for the United States. White spoke first. He offered a sincere apology for their failure. But Director Brennan shut him down immediately. "I didn't call you here for apologies. Just tell me what happened." White began explaining the situation. He said that according to Miss Selner's observations, Sung was likely one of the kings. "Excuse me?" Brennan blurted out, turning to Norma in disbelief. He frowned and asked if that meant Jinwoo was as powerful as a national-level hunter. Norma nodded, but added that it was more complicated and that she should explain. She began to speak about how all awakened draw their power from a place known as the other side. What she's able to sense is the connection between a hunter and that place. In rare cases, the power from the other side is so strong that the awakened appear as flashes of blinding light, and this type of person is what she calls a king. But in his case, when she looked into his eyes, all she had seen was darkness. Darkness that stared back at her. Darkness? Director Brennan thought to himself, and asked whether, in her opinion, that meant Sung Jinwoo was an evil being. Norma shook her head. She wasn't trying to say whether Jinwoo was good or evil. She was simply explaining where his power came from, adding that he didn't draw it from anywhere else but from within himself. Adam White listened carefully, and when Norma finished her explanation, he remarked that it meant there was no limit to his power. Norma nodded. Director Brennan stood up, thanked Miss Selner for her time, and was about to leave. Adam asked where he was headed, and Brennan replied that he was going to the 24th basement floor and ordered him to come along. The two of them got into the elevator, which slowly began descending. During the ride, Brennan remarked that if they couldn't use Miss Selner's abilities to secure Jinwoo, they would have to find another way. Then he asked Adam if he remembered the incident involving the first S-rank gate. Adam nodded and said he could never forget the most catastrophic dungeon break in history, one that had devastated the entire West Coast. He went on to share what he knew about the incident. The United States had hired the strongest hunters in the world and promised them massive rewards, but only 5 of them survived. Those who made it out were granted authority equal to that of an entire nation, and that's how the term national-level hunter was born. The monster they had faced back then was Kamish, known as the Inextinguishable Flame. His power was so overwhelming that he alone had wiped out hundreds of the highest-ranking hunters. As Adam recounted the events, the elevator arrived at its destination, and he and Director Brennan continued down a long corridor. While walking, Brennan asked Adam whether he would believe him if he told him that even something good had come out of that tragic event. Adam, surprised, said, "Surely you don't mean—" Brennan cut him off and assured him he'd bet anything that's exactly what he meant. He opened the security door and added, "See for yourself." On a pedestal before them rested the runestone that had been recovered from Kamish's corpse. Brennan explained that 8 years had passed since Kamish appeared, but no mage-class hunter of national level had emerged since then, so the stone remained without its rightful owner. He concluded by saying that Kamish's final gift to this land wouldn't be the runestone itself, but the hunter who would one day inherit its power. Jinwoo stared at himself in the mirror, lost in thought. He figured he must have grown a few inches since his reawakening and was definitely in better shape, but even so, he still questioned whether he was truly anything special. He was fairly certain his looks were average at best, though he did notice that his skin looked noticeably clearer. It made him wonder if it had something to do with the ability he'd gained, the will to recover, which gradually repaired all physical damage to the body. Then he peeked out of the bathroom and called out to his sister, asking if she could rate him. "In what sense?" she asked without even looking up from her phone. Jinwoo clarified he was talking about his appearance. Gina smirked and replied that she honestly had no idea where he got his confidence from. "In my eyes, you look like a bum," she added. In response, Jinwoo shoved her back onto the couch and dryly thanked her for the honest opinion. Gina started kicking him furiously, but Jinwoo stood perfectly still. Her hits didn't even register. With a smirk, he warned her that if she kept it up, she'd end up breaking her leg. He reminded her that his body now belonged to an S-rank hunter. Once things calmed down and Gina returned to scrolling through her phone, Jinwoo casually told her that he was planning to start his own guild. Oh? Does that mean you get to be the big boss now? Jinwoo replied that if everything went well, then yes. He then asked what she thought of the guild name he'd come up with, Solo Player Guild. Gina gave him a look of annoyance and asked if he was being serious, wondering why he'd choose a name like that. Jinwoo smiled and asked if the name really sounded that strange. Gina pointed out that he used his powers to summon shadow soldiers, so technically he wasn't really a solo player. Good point, Jinwoo admitted. Then he asked what name she would choose. Gina smiled and said, "How about the Ahjin Guild?" She added that in Chinese the characters Ah and Jin mean to go forward. Ahjin? Jinwoo repeated, surprised. Gina went on to say that it was just her name reversed and asked how it sounded to him. Jinwoo admitted that it actually didn't sound bad at all. After the fight with Baru, Hae-In admitted that the reason she wanted to join Jinwoo's guild was because she had feelings for him. However, Jinwoo said that might be exactly why it wouldn't be the best idea, and asked if perhaps another path would be better for her. In essence, it was a rejection. I think so. I basically told him I like him. He probably thinks I'm crazy. But he did save my life, so of course I'd be interested in him. I can't believe I just did that. Everything is totally not okay. Well, strictly speaking, I was able to survive because of Byung-goo's healing abilities. In that moment, Hae-In heard a voice. Please tell him. She looked around in confusion, but without warning, she suddenly found herself in a void, falling alone, deeper and deeper into the darkness. Someone grabbed her hand and repeated the same words. And then, silence. The hand began pulling her back, slowly turning her away from the darkness and toward the light. It was Byung-gu. She could see him clearly, and his urgent voice pleaded with her to deliver a message, to tell him he had to be careful, to warn Sung Jin-woo about the power hidden inside him. And then Hae-In was back in her room. It had been a memory, a moment from when she was dying. She had seen Byung-gu. He had connected with her while trying to save her, leaving behind a message, a warning meant for Jin-woo. The Korean Guild Knights was one of the 5 major guilds in the country. Although it didn't have any S-rank hunters, it boasted the highest number of A-rank hunters in all of Korea. The guild headquarters were buzzing with activity. The leadership had just been informed that a new gate had appeared the previous day, and according to the Hunter Association's data, it was a very high level. Guildmaster Park Jong-soo and Vice Guildmaster Young Yoon-tae were discussing the possibility of securing permission to enter the gate. Park noted that if they weren't careful, they could all end up dead. Young argued that they probably didn't have enough manpower to handle a gate of that level, and voiced concern that failing to clear it could damage the guild's reputation. Park sighed, saying that the public couldn't even tell the difference between A, B, C, D, and E-rank hunters anyway. Young then suggested that if they backed off, the Fame Guild would likely take it on instead. At that moment, the guildmaster snapped. He shouted at his deputy, asking if he was seriously suggesting they hand over a gate that had appeared practically in their own backyard to another guild. A startled Young quickly explained that he was only informing him of the possibility. Park calmed down and continued. He said that their guild's hunters were just as capable as those from the other major guilds. The only difference was that they lacked an S-rank hunter to round out their assault teams. At that point, Young Yerim, an A-rank healer, joined the conversation and asked why they didn't just form an alliance with another guild to help clear the gate. Park snapped back, asking if he seriously thought any guild would agree to such an alliance. Forming an alliance would be the same as admitting they couldn't clear the gate on their own. Then, Yerim suggested that instead of teaming up with an entire guild, they could partner with an individual hunter. Park immediately began to dismiss the idea, arguing that a single hunter wouldn't make any difference. But then he paused. He realized who Yerim was talking about. Yerim asked if he knew who he meant, and Park nodded. He said that forming an alliance with another guild could hurt their reputation, But partnering with Sung Jin-woo might do the opposite. Not only could it boost their image, but it would also give them a much better chance of clearing the gate safely. He turned to his deputy and asked what Sung Jin-woo had been up to lately. Yoon-tae replied that he had recently cleared a gate that appeared in the middle of a highway, but there had been no news about him since. He then offered to get in touch with him. But Park declined, saying it wouldn't be right to handle something like this over the phone, and he added that they would visit him in person. What do you think of the name Ahjin Guild? Jin-ho lit up at the suggestion and immediately proposed making it the guild's official name, though inwardly he thought anything was better than Solo Player Guild. Jin-woo nodded in satisfaction and said that now, with the name settled, all that remained was to find the final member. Curious, Jin-ho asked what had happened with Miss Cha the day before, but Jin-woo replied that he didn't think she was the right fit for their guild. She wasn't the one he was looking for. Jin-ho was confused. She was an S rank, young, had an impressive track record, and even had killer looks. Who could possibly be better than Miss Cha, he wondered. But instead, he just asked who exactly they were looking for. Jin-woo replied that they needed someone who held a hunter license, wasn't interested in joining a guild, but was still trustworthy. Jin-ho thought for a moment and mentioned that a few names came to mind, when there was a knock at the door. Jin-woo went to open the door, wondering if it might be Hae-In again. But when he opened it, he found 3 smiling members of the Night Guild standing outside. Guildmaster Park introduced himself right away, and both Jin-woo and Jin-ho stared in disbelief at their unexpected guests. Moments later, Jin-woo and Park were seated across from each other, with Park showing him video footage on his laptop. The recordings clearly captured a massive gate. Park began explaining that while gate size isn't always the key factor, the amount of mana leaking from it definitely is. And this one was releasing a gargantuan amount. Jin-woo asked if the Hunter Association had classified it as an S-rank gate. Park shook his head, saying it had just barely fallen short of being considered unmeasurable, and added that it was the largest gate ever to appear in Busan. Busan, Jin-woo thought. It occurred to him that he could meet up with Juhi and ask if she'd make him some sashimi. Park continued, saying that Jin-woo had probably already noticed, but the Hunter Association had denied their guild permission to enter the gate. The reason was that the Night Guild didn't have an S-rank hunter, making the operation too risky. He added, however, that the association might reconsider if Jin-woo joined their assault team, and assured him that they would offer proper compensation for his participation. Then Park made his offer. He explained that normally, when a major guild invites an S-rank hunter to join a raid, the standard cut is 10% of the profits, but they were willing to offer him 20%. Jin-woo closed his eyes and said, "Let's make that 50-50. "Excuse me?" Park asked, shocked. Jin-woo explained that he'd be willing to team up with them, but only on the condition that they treated him like a guild, not just an individual hunter, and informed them that he was in the process of founding his own guild, called Ahjin. Sweat began to form on Park's forehead as he offered a 40-60 split instead. But Jin-woo refused and made it clear he wasn't open to negotiation. Park realized that even though Jin-woo looked like some young punk, he was anything but naive. He said he'd agree to an even split, but in return, he wanted Jin-woo to take down the dungeon boss for them and asked if he could handle it. Jin-woo confirmed that it wouldn't be a problem. Park began laying out the details. He explained that the gate had already been open for some time and the raid needed to begin by tomorrow at the latest to avoid a potential break. He offered to give Jin-woo a ride to Busan if he wanted. Jin-woo declined, saying he had plans for the evening, but promised he wouldn't be late and that they'd see each other at the gate tomorrow. A shadow shifted at Jin-woo's feet. The only one who noticed was Yoon-tae, who immediately, and with concern, pointed it out to Park. But Park just snapped back, asking if he was drunk or something. At that moment, Jin-woo's phone started ringing. He tried to place the number, but no one came to mind. He excused himself and stepped outside to see who was calling. When he answered the call, it was his mom on the line. Jin-woo smiled and immediately asked if she was calling from the new phone he had ordered for her. She said yes and told him she called as soon as she got it, just because she wanted to hear his voice. Then she asked if she was calling at a bad time. Jin-woo said no, and with a hint of amusement thought to himself, Who else would even be calling him besides his mom? He asked if they could have dinner together that evening, and she replied that she'd love that. Park was anxious. The raid was about to begin, and Jin-woo still hadn't shown up. He thought to himself that he should have forced him to come to Busan with them the night before, and kept glancing nervously at the clock. Only 5 minutes remained. Jin-woo, meanwhile, was looking up at the sky. The clouds were dark, and it looked like it could start raining any moment. He hoped Gina had brought an umbrella, then decided it was time to move and activated Shadow Exchange. A group of students walked down the hallway, complaining that the teacher had basically turned them into cheap labor. Their task was to carry plaster busts for the art class, one for each group. As they entered the classroom, they were disgusted by how dusty everything was and wondered when it had last been cleaned. One of them commented that the room probably hadn't been used the entire semester. And then they saw it, the gate. One of them walked right up to it, stopped, and said there was nothing to be afraid of. It was closed and only hunters could pass through. He added that monsters couldn't come out until at least a week had passed. The other 2 students hesitated. One of them slowly asked if he hadn't just said that the classroom hadn't been used all semester, and that the fact they had found it just now meant. The gate trembled, and from its center, a massive green hand emerged, grabbed the student standing closest by the head, and squeezed. His friends screamed his name in panic, but it was already too late. The hand was crushing his skull, and then the monster appeared. I hope you enjoyed the video, and thank you for watching.